Muslim, I just wanted to highlight one, not even a whole ayah, one expression from within one ayah. And the expression that this khutbah is dedicated to is the expression, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ijtanibu kathiran min al-dhann, inna ba'da al-dhanni ithm. This is all I'm going to be talking to you about today. Roughly translated, the ayah says, those of you who claim to believe, avoid, circumvent, or stay away as much as possible, and a great deal from making assumptions of dhann. Inna ba'da al-dhanni ithm. No doubt after assumption comes sin. This is a rough translation of what the ayah says. So let's explore what it's saying at a little bit of a deeper level, inshallah. First and foremost, I want to tell you that the ayah right before talks about us not making fun of other people. لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّن قَوْمٍ. It's not okay for you and me to make fun of one group, another group. If you notice, for instance, the popular comedy industry, you know, stand-up comedians or cartoons that are comical in nature or shows that are comedy in nature, they'll try to make fun of a particular ethnicity a certain way. They'll stereotype something that's funny about the Arab, or they'll stereotype something that's funny about the Mexican, or something that's funny about the black guy, or the white guy, or the Asian guy, or the Indian guy, and they'll have these stereotypes, and you know, they'll mock the way they speak, or they'll mock the way they dress, or mock the way they eat, and everybody gets a laugh out of it. Well, this is the ayah that says, that brand of comedy is no good. لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّن قَوْمٍ. You shouldn't do this. It is not something that breeds respect for other people in a culture. It actually breeds this idea of intolerance and looking at other people as something to laugh at or beneath you and yourself as superior. But again, that's not my topic today. The topic is the one about assumptions. But I'm telling you that assumptions come as a result of that kind of comedy. Once it just starts, I'm just making a joke, but I'm just saying. I'm just kidding. And you do enough of that, and you know what? It starts sinking in your head that those people are like that. So it starts off as jokes, but eventually just becomes a conviction. You're convinced that those people that you've been making fun of for so long are exactly the way the jokes say they are. You know? They're exactly the way the jokes say they are. And by the way, this is not just, again I say, not just about ethnicities. It's also about religions. It's also about people of different faiths. Like, you know, a lot of, for example, Indo-Paks love making fun of Hindus or Sikhs. There's a lot of Sikh jokes. You know, that's unacceptable. And it's national too, like, you know, Bangladeshis can have Pakistani jokes and Pakistanis can have Bangladeshi jokes. And it's funny. It's funny to them. But you know what? When you think it's just a joke, but eventually it becomes a stereotype and a kind of bigotry that's accepted in a society. It just becomes acceptable to them. And they end up violating every time they make a joke like that. They reinforce that stereotype, so when they look at a person from a different ethnicity, and even the thought crosses their mind, a judgment passes in their head, even that becomes an evil thing to do. Because you don't find in the Quran, this is what's remarkable about this ayah, you don't find in the Quran us being reprimanded for thinking. You may have learned before that, you know, actions we will be answerable for. If you thought about something, there was some bad thought that came in your head, but you didn't act on it. You didn't act on it. It was just a thought that came in your head. Then you're still okay. But you know what? There's a few exceptions to that. For example, intentions are a thought. And even though your action may be good, if your intention's corrupt, that thought can dictate how that action counts. And another interesting and remarkable and unique exception to that is this ayah. اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن فأين يقع الظن. You know, Allah says stay as much as possible away from this concept of dhann, which right now in a coarse translation I'm translating as making assumptions. But the idea of making assumptions is just something that's going on in your head. You didn't say anything. You didn't do anything. And even that Allah is saying don't even think like that. You see? That's a very, very strange ayah in that the previous ayah said don't make fun of people. That's understandable. That's actually saying something, doing something. It's an action. The next ayah, and even later on in this ayah, don't spy on people. Don't backbite against people. Right? Those are actions that people do. They spy against one another. They try to dig up dirt against one another. Don't do that stuff. Fine. But here we're being taught to change the way we think, and this is critical. We're learning something very powerful about this process. If you don't change the way people think, if you don't change the way you think and I think, then things are not going to get better. Things are going to get worse. Actually, the crimes that Allah mentions after that, ghiba, backbiting that you've heard many times about, spying on one another, not trusting each other, All of that actually begins with a certain kind of thinking. It starts with a certain kind of thinking. And Allah says, stay as much as possible away from that kind of thinking. So let's begin with that a little now, inshallah. That was just introductory commentary about اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن. Now, let's take the word ijtinab first. Ijtinab originally comes from the word jamb in Arabic, which actually means the side of something. Okay? So, you know, when people lie down on their sides, وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ, they're lying on their sides. When you're traveling on a plane, we don't have much public transportation in Dallas, but if we did, and you're sitting in a subway or you're sitting on a bus or something, there's a person next to you that was صَاحِبِ بِالْجَمْبِ. There's a person sitting next to you. Or you're sitting in a waiting room at a hotel, or you know, in a lobby, or in a hospital, or in a doctor's office or something, and the person sitting next to you, this is صَاحِب بِالْجَمْبِ, because they're sitting right by your side. Now from it comes an interesting verb, al-ijtinab, which means to avoid something that is right next to you. It actually literally means avoidance, but how does it mean avoidance? It's not just to avoid something that is far away, but it's actually right next to you. So you're in danger of being contaminated by it, so you have to go out of your way to get away from it. What we're learning then is the idea of making assumptions about people is inevitable. It's always there. It's always right next to you. It's not something you say, well, I don't judge people, man. I don't judge people. I'm not like that. Actually, it's always there. And the ifti'al form, ijtinab form, actually in the Arabic language suggests you have to make an effort to do it. It doesn't come naturally. When you put something in ifti'al, it doesn't come naturally. It's not just something you just do without even thinking about it. It takes effort. So it doesn't matter that you haven't done it before. You still have to make an effort not to do it now. It's not something that becomes passive. It's not like that. It's not like breathing. It's not passive. So ijtanibu means whatever Allah is telling us to stay away from, you got to have an active mind, and you have to be vigilant, and you have to realize that you're always going to be in the danger of making that mistake. Nobody can assume that they're self-righteous enough, they're pure enough that they won't fall into this mistake. Had that not been a danger, Allah Azza wa Jal could have very easily told us, لا تظنوا. That's a simple amr. يعني خير الكلام ما قل ودل. The best kind of speech is when you say less. Don't make assumptions. لا تظنوا. You know? عن بعضكم بعضا. Don't make assumptions about each other. The language is done. But he says اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن. This is actually الإطالة في الكلام البلاغة. They say. You extended the speech. You said a lot more than just don't make assumptions. Stay away from it because it's always going to be right next to you. Then he adds the word كثيرا. كثيرا, which is also strange. When Ibrahim alayhi salam makes dua, وَاجْنُبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ, he doesn't add the word كثيرا. Prevent me and my children from worshipping idols. He doesn't say وَاجْنُبْنِي كثيرا. He doesn't say that. وَاجْتَنِبُ الطَّاغُوتِ يَأْمُرُنَا سبحانه وتعالى. وَاجْتَنِبُ الطَّاغُوتِ. لم يقل وَاجْتَنِبُوا كثيرا الطاغوت. He says اجْتَنِبُوا كثيرا. And even there, وَاجْتَنِبُوا, he said الطاغوت, not مِنَ الطاغوت. And here he says مِنَ الظَّنِ, which actually adds a tab'id. It's even further, meaning it's so close to you, you gotta push it away from you. And you've gotta do it a lot. In other words, virtually every conversation you and I have has the possibility of us making assumptions about someone. You've gotta think about this a lot. I've gotta become very conscious of this if we're gonna live by this. So and before I talk about how do we avoid it, let's at least deal with the word dhann a little bit. What does dhann mean? Where does it come from in the Arabic language? It's called from lughatul afdad. It's from the language of opposites. In other words, it means to make assumptions about something. Obviously, when you make assumptions about something, you don't know for sure. You know? You don't really know what you're talking about. But dhann also means that your assumption grows to the point where now you are absolutely convinced of something. It actually means both of those things. That's why in the positive sense, you find it in the Quran, الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ. يعني يُوقِنُونَ. They're absolutely convinced that they're going to be meeting with their master. That's a kind of conviction. Before Iman, they had an assumption. Am I going to meet Allah or not? I don't know, there's a thought. After Iman, it became firm one. It became conviction. So الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ. Right? But on the other hand, there are people who say things. They just say, we're not going to be raised after we die. You know? وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهَرِ وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. They say, we're not going to be raised after we die. And Allah says, they have no knowledge about that. They're just making assumptions. يَظُنُّونَ. فَهِيَ مِنْ لُغَةِ الْأَفْضَالِ. This verb and this act is from the language of, it's a kind of an oxymoronic language. But what does it mean here? Here in particular, it means first you have an assumption about somebody. I don't like that guy. I don't know, the guy is kind of... Somebody walks into the masjid, man, that guy doesn't even have a beard. Astaghfirullah. This guy's wearing pants, dressed like the kuffar. What's wrong with this guy? You just you look at someone and size them up. You don't make any judgments yet. But you know what? As time progresses, you become absolutely convinced and confident they're all like this. They're all like that. All the Africans are like that. All the Senegalese are like that. All the Nigerians are like that. All the Bangladeshis are like that. All the Turks are like that. Man, I know them all. You don't know those guys, I know. That's one. You are so convinced. You are so convinced. You're so set in your assumptions. So set in your assumptions. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann." It's not even about other ethnicities, even inside our homes. Even inside our homes.